Hello 8th graders and happy Monday. Today we're going to talk about transversals of parallel lines. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, but I want to make sure we have it down because tomorrow we're going to do triangles inside of parallel lines. I know you're going to crush this video. Let's get started. Look at shape number 1. Does that show a translation, reflection, or rotation? Shape number 1 shows a rotation 90 degrees counterclockwise. Let's look at shape number 2. Does that show a translation, reflection, or rotation? Shape number 2 shows a translation. It's still pointing in the same direction. Look at shape number 3. Does that show a translation, reflection, or rotation? That shape was reflected over the x-axis. If you look, you can see that point C is on the bottom for the original figure and on the top for the image. That is a reflection. Now let's find some missing angles. Look at number 4. Remember that all of the angles on a straight line add up to 180 degrees. To solve for x, first I would need to add 53 and 65. What's 53 plus 65? It's 118. So if I know that the angle that isn't x is 118 and x is on a straight line, then I can subtract 180 minus 118 to find the value of x. What's the value of x? The value of x is 62 degrees. Now look at number 5. Go ahead and find that missing angle. Remember that all of the angles on a straight line add up to 180 degrees. The value of x is 50 degrees. When I add 55, 25, and 50, I get 130. When I subtract 130 from 180, the remaining angle is 50 degrees. Look at number 6. Remember that the angles of a triangle also add up to 180 degrees. So to find angle W, I can add 45 plus 45 and then subtract from 180. What's 45 plus 45? It's 90. What's 180 minus 90? It's also 90. In this triangle, angle W is 90 degrees. Now solve for angle C in triangle number 7. Angle C is 60 degrees. When I add 60 plus 60, I get 120. When I subtract that from 180, 60 is the angle that remains. Now look at number 8. What is the value of angle B? Well, 73 degrees and B are vertical angles. That means that they are equal. So B is equal to 73 degrees. Now look at number 9. What's the value of angle B? In this question, B is vertical to 43 degrees. So B is 43 degrees. We'll use vertical angles to help us today. Now let's start today's lesson. Today we're going to talk about angles that are formed by a transversal that cuts across parallel lines. Here, angle 1 is 110 degrees. Let's fill in the rest of the angles with their measures. How could I find the measure of angle 2? Angle 2 is on the same straight line as angle 1, so I can subtract 180 minus 110 to find the value of angle 2. What's 180 minus 110? 180 minus 110 is 70 degrees, so angle 2 is 70 degrees. What's the value of angle 3? Angle 3 is vertical to angle 2, so they're congruent, or equivalent. It's equal to 70 degrees. What's the value of angle 4? Angle 4 is vertical to angle 1, so it's equal to 110 degrees. I know that if I translate a line down this transversal, the angles will not change. So what's angle 5? It's also 110 degrees. What's angle 6? It's also 70 degrees. What's angle 7? It's also 70 degrees. What's angle 8? It's 110 degrees. I can use my knowledge of vertical angles and translations to help me discover which angles are 110 and which angles are 70. But I can also use knowledge of different angle relationships inside of parallel lines. First, let's think about vertical angles. We've studied these before. Which angle pairs were vertical? Angles 1 and 4 are vertical. They're directly across from one another. Angles 2 and 3 are vertical. Angles 5 and 8 are vertical, and angles 7 and 6 are vertical. Now let's think about which angle pairs are alternate interior angles. That means they're on opposite sides of the transversal inside the parallel lines. Angles 3 and 6 are alternate interior angles. And angles 4 and 5 are alternate interior angles. Which angle pairs are alternate exterior angles? That means on opposite sides of the transversal and outside the parallel lines. Well, angles 1 and 8 are on opposite sides of the transversal and outside the parallel lines. Angles 2 and 7 are also alternate exterior angles. The last type of angle measure we'll investigate in this box are corresponding angles. That means angles that are in the same spot in their angle groups. Angle 1 and 5 are corresponding. Angles 2 and 6 are corresponding. Angles 3 and 7 are corresponding. And angles 4 and 8 are corresponding. All of the angle pairs in this box represent equivalent angles, angles that have the same measure. Vertical angles are equivalent, alternate interior angles are equivalent, alternate exterior angles are equivalent, and corresponding angles are equivalent. Which angle pairs are adjacent? Well, there are several, so we'll just give a few examples. 1 and 2 are adjacent. They're right next to each other. 1 and 3 are adjacent. They're also right next to each other. 5 and 6 are adjacent. 2 and 4 are adjacent. 7 and 8 are adjacent. Any angles that are right next to each other are adjacent angles. Now let's look at which ones are same side interior. That means they're inside the parallel lines on the same side of the transversal. 3 and 5 are on the same side and interior angles. And 4 and 6 are on the same side, interior angles. Now let's look at same side exterior angles. 1 and 7 are on the same side and exterior outside of the parallel lines. 2 and 8 are on the same side and exterior. All of these angle pairs are supplementary. They add up to 180 degrees. We can use our knowledge of these angle pairs to help us solve for missing angles. Let's look at an example. What is the name of the angle pair formed by 136 degrees and x? These are alternate interior angles. They're on opposite sides of the transversal and inside the parallel lines. What's the relationship of alternate interior angles? They're equivalent. So what does that mean is the value of x? It's 136 degrees. Let's look at two more examples. Angles x and 125 degrees. How would I name this angle pair? These are adjacent angles. What's the relationship between adjacent angles? Adjacent angles are supplementary because they lie on the same line. What's the value of x? 180 minus 125 is 55 degrees, so x is 55 degrees. Look at the next example. What is the name of this angle pair, 53 degrees and x? These are corresponding angles. What is the relationship between corresponding angles? Corresponding angles are equivalent to one another. So what's the value of x? It's 53 degrees. Let's look at another angle relationship. What's the name of the angle pair x and 61 degrees? These are vertical angles. So what's the relationship? These angles are equivalent. So what's the value of x? It's 61 degrees. Let's look at another. What's the name of this angle pair, 74 degrees and x? These are same side interior angles. They're inside the parallel lines and on the same side of the transversal. So what's their relationship? These angles are supplementary, or they add up to 180 degrees. So what's the value of x? X is 106 degrees. Let's look at another. What's the name of this angle pair, 89 degrees and x? These are alternate exterior angles. So what's their relationship? Alternate exterior angles are equivalent to one another. So what's the value of x? It's 89 degrees. Let's look at another. Name this angle pair, 53 degrees and x. These are alternate interior angles. So what's their relationship? These two angles are equivalent. So what's the value of x? It's 53 degrees. What about these angles? What's the name of this angle pair? These are same side exterior angles. So what's their relationship? They are supplementary. Find the value of x. X is 106 degrees. Let's look at another angle relationship. X and 122 degrees. What's the name of this angle pair? These are same side interior angles. So what's their relationship? They are supplementary. Use that knowledge to find the value of x. The value of x is 58 degrees. 180 minus 122 is 58. Let's look at a few more. What's the name of this angle pair? 71 degrees and x. These are alternate interior angles. They're inside the parallel lines and on opposite sides of the transversal. What's the angle relationship for alternate interior angles? These angles are equivalent. What's the value of x? It's 71 degrees. Let's look at the next example. What's the relationship between 40 degrees and x? These are adjacent angles. They're right next to one another. What's the relationship between adjacent angles? Adjacent angles are supplementary because they're on the same line. What's the value of x? X is 140 degrees. Two more angle relationships to look at. What's the name for this angle pair formed by x and 149 degrees? These are alternate interior angles. What's the angle relationship for alternate interior angles? These angles are equivalent. So what's the value of x? It's 149 degrees. Let's look at one last example. What's the angle pair name for 73 degrees and x? These are same side exterior angles. They're on the same side of the transversal, but outside the parallel lines. What's the relationship between same side exterior angles? Same side exterior angles are supplementary. What's the value of x? The value of x is 107 degrees. You've done a great job on this video. Now it's time to move to IXL Practice 0.12. make sure you're showing any necessary work on your paper.